Hello, hello. This is Darren. We are on a Monday night looking at the Gospel of Matthew. I'm going to try to make these beeping noises stop. There we go. Also bring my microphone a little closer as well. Do all the right things. Yes. So tonight we are looking at Matthew chapter 20. Another kind of difficult parable from Matthew, this one in chapter 20. So I will take a minute to go ahead and read it so you know where we're at. Matthew 20. Let me get it up here. All right. The laborers in the vineyard is the heading they give it. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. When he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" And they said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then go to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received a denarius. Now when the first came, they thought that they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to the last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last." I should stop sharing the screen because I don't really understand what this ad that I'm getting is all about here. I can't seem to make it go away. Anyway. Part of what you'll notice probably right away there is that, again, this picks up one of Matthew's favorite sayings here, the first will be last and the last will be first. So that interpretation of the parable is part of what Matthew is trying to get at by telling this story. Sorry, my mic is acting really weird. Anyway. All right. I don't know what to do about it. Not much I can do about it. All right. Well, I hope that we'll see Mark or Leonard come through here in a little bit, or maybe both. And until then, I just wanted to say a couple things about the text that come to my mind. I know that first of all, it's obviously quite natural for those who have worked all day to feel like they should be compensated more for what they've done. And I think most of the time when people hear this parable, at least when I've preached it or talked about this story, people are generally upset by the situation. They don't like this story very much. So that's pretty interesting. I'll get more into this a little bit later and back it up a little bit with some of the some of the some of the text and some of the commentary. But I remember the last time that I preached this this text. What I was trying to say was to get people to think about what it would be like to be the laborers who are still waiting to get hired. You know, we kind of, in our society, we kind of have this mentality that if people aren't working, it's because of some personal flaw that they have. You know, if you're not, you know, you're doing something wrong if you're not, you know, working all the day long. And it's people have easily and you know, without much effort, have labeled the ones who are still in the, you know, still waiting to get hired as somehow lazy or somehow not you know, not taking advantage of the situation. You know, maybe they showed up late themselves or what, you know, whatever it may be. There's always a move to blame those folks for not being not doing something in order to get hired at the beginning of the day. But what I was trying to say in the last time I preached this was just to suggest that you know, if you are that day laborer who's waiting to be hired all day long, and this is the way that you are going to provide for your family, um, you know, it's almost, there's a mental anguish attached to waiting that is different than the people who are hired at the beginning of the day. You know, they know as soon as they start working that they're at least going to have, you know, the minimum. Yeah. Anyway, that was, and I'll just end by saying, well, I'll let Mark in. I'll bring Mark in first. Mark, I was just sharing about the last time that I preached this text, as I was just saying, kind of where I was heading with it last time I preached. And are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Good evening.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. I think you might have a
It's,
little delay on
it's
your audio, but
yeah, I don't know what's going on. The internet doing, I don't know, it's acting a little funny.
doing what it wants to do.
What it
Anyway, so I
wants,
was
what it
saying, you know, I
wants.
was saying, yeah. So yeah, that was the last time I preached on it. That was kind of like the way I was heading with it. And I had a guy come up to me after the service, and he said to me, he said, you know, I, I I really appreciate your sermon. I appreciate what what you were saying. I don't agree with it. I appreciate so
Just like that.
yeah. I don't agree with it, but
Wow.
I appreciate yeah. So
Wow, that's interesting. I'm gonna tell
yeah.
you something. I hope you to help me out because I got some problems with this text, and
Right.
maybe I heard just the 2 or 3 words. I got some
Yeah.
problems.
Right.
Um,
Right.
all right. I mean, when you read Warren Carr's analysis. I can't remember if it was in Matthew in the Margins or in his other book I read,
Oh,
when
right. Right.
he breaks down, and I think he has a diagram. I wish I could find that diagram. I think it's somewhere in Matthew in the Margins.
Right.
Where there's that diagram. If you can pull it up, I'll share it, whatever.
Yeah.
But if we look at the socioeconomic background of this text, as Carter would say, um,
Mm-hmm.
the 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 um the um the person who owns the vineyard is probably extremely well off.
Mm-hmm.
The day laborers in the parable, according to Carter, he says that probably made up 90% of the population during Matthew's time.
Right.
They represented almost the very bottom of the socioeconomic
Mm-hmm.
scale.
Right.
Um, so I mean, I really I really thank God for Carter because he gave me a totally different understanding of the Lord's Prayer. That part where it says, "Give us this day our daily bread," because I have a totally different understanding of that now
Right, right,
than I did before. When I think about the background, the socioeconomic background.
right.
So this guy's very, very well off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, these guys get paid a denarii, which, if I'm understanding Carter's analogy, would be the equivalent of me making 2020's minimum wage now in 2023.
Right.
Probably maybe the roundabout equivalent. I mean,
Yeah.
2020 minimum wage was a struggle. Now with this inflation and the cost of housing and rent,
Right.
it really would be a struggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I guess my struggle with this text is that, and in the end, it's he talks about the great reversal, and that's fine, but
Mm-hmm.
the condition of existence of these day laborers at the end of the story does not change. Because if
Right.
Carter's analysis is correct, these folks really did struggle. When we say "Give us this day our daily bread,"
Mm-hmm.
he says that. I think he says in his other book that, um, if you were, like a migrant farmer or whatever, or you planted crops, you may, or you fished, you may make money that day, you may not. your your
Right.
your your proceeds might be seized by Herod or by
Mm-hmm.
Rome, as we know that because they control the fishing and the industry. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean, a denarii wasn't enough to make it during the day. And again, at the end of this parable, their situation did not change. So when they got up tomorrow, this is Monday, they got up tomorrow, they're in the very same socioeconomic situation that they were the day of the parable.
Right. Right.
So my thing is, and that's one of my issues that it has not, their socioeconomic condition did not change.
Right.
And actually, when we read the parable, and the one guy says that he was expecting more. I mean, then the folks that he expected more, for the folks that stayed all day and worked, maybe were a little bit outraged that they didn't get as much as the people that that just got there. I can understand
Right.
their struggle based on where they're at in the social economic spectrum.
Right. Yeah, and part of the issue again is that we want to too easily equate the landowner with God, right?
Right.
And in the end, like you're saying, well, this was Carter's argument, right? About people saying that's about generosity. You know, in the end, it's certainly not about generosity because the landowner is not being generous to anyone. You know, the denarius he's giving is not generous in any way, shape, or form.
No,
It's
not at all. I think Carter was saying that was the typical wage for that time,
right,
but that wage was, I mean, you really could. It really was a struggle to survive
right.
on that wage.
Yeah, one of the I don't have that. I wish I had that book so I could show it, but I'm not sure what I did with. But there's an author. His name is Herzog that has
I've
a
heard of him. Yeah,
yeah. He has a book called um
I found it. And I'm using the Kindle version. I don't know if I
oh,
could share it.
oh, let me I was just looking for my phone. I couldn't find it.
I think. Well, I got paid 18, but that might not be right.
Yeah, and I have it right. I have it here in my
Okay.
little notebooks that I can.
Yeah.
I was going to try to take a picture of it, but I thought I didn't have my phone, but now
Yeah.
I do. So I'll yeah, I don't know if you can share your
Can you
Kindle
share
screen.
this thing?
Is it on like the iCloud reader or whatever?
Let me see. Share screen. I clicked on that.
Go to window and see if it's in there.
Yeah, this thing is so small. Let's see.
Because I'll do a picture of it here now if we don't
Let's see.
get.
Let me know what comes up.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, because he's got the what did it do? I must have
Took it away.
took it away. Let me see if I can get back to it. Okay.
There you go.
The owner of the vineyard would be at the very, very top here.
Right.
And those day laborers would be down here where that arrow is at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So a tremendous gap in
Right.
socioeconomic status. And what I like what Carter was saying in terms of not this book here, but the other book I read by him, he talked about the elite despised the laborers and
Right.
despised that. So they had what's the word I want to use? Total despise for these folks.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't stand them. Couldn't stand. I mean, the type of work that they did. Despised the whole class, and I would imagine if in the Jewish culture they would have been considered unclean. So they were outsiders in terms of probably the temple or what have you. So they're outsiders there, and they're despised by the elites. They represent the according to this culture, the scum of the earth.
Yeah, let me see if I can. Maybe if I share, I'm gonna see if I can share this.
I'm gonna stop. So
see if I can share this other one. This I gotta.
Oh yeah, yep, there it is.
Yeah,
there it is.
Yeah. So if people like so, let me see if I can. I was trying to see if I could highlight it, but I don't think I can. But you can see right here that this is day laborers and landless peasants here.
Right. Right.
So the way that this just for anyone who watches this now or later, the as you can see here, the spectrum on the side here is wealth, status, power. So as you go up here, you get higher in wealth, status, and power. So emperors at the top, and then you go down and you have merchants, traders, artisans, day laborers, slaves here.
Where would you say like the high priest would be? They probably would be not the very top.
Right.
Maybe.
I think like here in this retainers area is where he puts those,
right there.
puts the priests,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then you see the population. So this is a small portion of the population, and then the larger portion as you go out.
The vineyard, the guy who owns the vineyard, I guess in today's economic times would represent the top 3%, the 1% or the 3%, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think what some people were arguing would be that this person would be somewhere in this urban elite, maybe an urban landowner who farmed out there, who might have went and hired people, but then sent them to and deal, mostly it's their servants or their managers who are dealing with that, dealing with everything. But obviously part of the parable is kind of the interesting way of bringing the actual landowner into the parable, which probably wouldn't have actually happened in real life. They wouldn't have been dealing with the rabble, so to speak. And maybe at this point it'd be good to just look at that little section from see if I can find it. That little section from Carter on day laborers.
Yeah.
What exactly their lot was. I'll see if I can.
You looking at Matthew in the margins?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because he has this little section here about day laborers. So they were a common sight in the agora or marketplace as they waited to be hired for work. They were a readily available pool of cheap labor for wealthier landowners and urban dwellers, commonly uprooted from peasant farms, taken over by wealthy landowners after foreclosing on debt or forced from family plots because they could not support the household. They look for agricultural or urban work, usually day by day and at minimum rates. During planting and harvest, work was rarely available for vintage and haying, but in between times it was often not. For these expendables or involuntary marginals, See introduction, section 5, which I think is
Right.
what we just
Yeah.
looked at. Life was unpredictable, marked by unemployment, malnutrition, starvation, disease, minimal wages, removal from households, and begging. Their situation was more precarious than slaves since an employer had no long-term investment in them.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah,
And of course, this is a culture without a safety net. So I
right,
mean, it is
right,
what you got, what you got, and
right,
it's pretty much survival of the fittest.
right. And
Yeah.
it's another thing to add to the denarius comment as well. Is that these folks were in that precarious position of, they were not artisans or regular workers, so they were paid even less than other people just because they were, you gave them as little as you possibly could.
Right.
So
So you wonder if the hearers of this parable, if they heard this parable, like, man, are you crazy?
right,
I mean, in terms of, I mean, I don't have any respect for this wealthy guy because he has as much in common with me as I have with a
right,
fly, you know.
right,
And I'm wondering if the community that Matthew coming from might probably had the similar reaction. So, um, I guess the challenge would be, okay, we hear the parable, then what's the next step in terms of that community? I mean, are we doing things to change the situation of the day laborers? Are we challenging the forces? Are we challenging the landowners
right.
to
Yeah,
have
right.
to be more?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because Herzog in man, I wish I could the book. This is not the title. I think this is the subtitle of this book.
Yeah.
Is called. It's basically like the parables of Jesus and the pedagogy of the oppressed.
Uh-huh.
So it uses kind of Freire's model of education, to talk about Jesus and the parables. And so in this one, well, so one of the things he does is he's not, he's a more like historical critical kind of scholar in some ways.
What's his
So
first name?
um
I've
I
heard
think
I've
it's
heard the
Frank.
name
I think
Herzog.
it's Frank. There's a couple different Herzogs too.
Okay, maybe I
Um,
might be thinking of a different Herzog.
but oh, actually, no. He's I think he's the same one who wrote that the John commentary that I was using. Remember that, like where he says the thing about where he's talking about. Now I totally skipped my mind. Where he talks about basically the those on the outside as being black. You remember
Yeah.
that? Like, yeah,
Okay. Oh
that's
yeah.
the same.
Yeah, I
It's
remember. I remember that. I remember
yeah,
that.
the same.
Remember that.
Yeah, Frederick Herzog. So that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. It's
this is
upside
his
down, but yeah, I remember. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So let me,
Yeah.
yeah. So he, but his other one he wrote is about the parables, and that's got the But anyway, what I was going to say is that what he would say about this text is that Matthew has edited Jesus' parable, and yeah, good, thanks. um, has edited this parable and added the little comments about the last shall be first,
Yeah.
and tied it into his point, but that what Jesus is really doing is kind of what you're saying. Jesus is pointing out to the people the oppressive system that they live under. He's
They
telling
live
them a
under.
story,
Right. Right.
to highlight that.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah,
And
definitely, Leonard.
learn the kind of migrant workers. Yeah. I mean the condition, the existential situation of these day laborers is no different than the migrant farmers we employ today that feed
Right.
us every day that we don't have any respect for.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Actually, did you see in Case Winter's commentary? She had an article that what she called it, the corners of our economy or whatever. It was kind of like an article from a number of years ago about day laborers, even in
Yeah.
our society.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that they were saying in that article was that one of the things that the day laborers face nowadays, especially migrant workers or people without papers, is that you can work all day and someone might not pay you.
Exactly.
You
Because,
have no,
right.
you have
Because
no,
there was no
Yeah.
Well, back then that you didn't have any. There was no union. There was
Right.
no system to check
Hmm.
the landowners.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
they were free to do what they want. Um,
Yeah.
and really, it's really almost the same today. I mean, in
Yeah.
this in this age, in this culture, where we have um, a particular party, the Republican Party, who believes in deregulation, which believes not having those checks and balances in place to make sure that those in power are not
Right.
taking advantage of folk.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess the thing is, again, you know, how do we react to this?
Right.
I mean, do we can all understand, oh, it's a nice parable about reversal and the and the and the vineyard owner is God. I just don't see it that way,
Right. Right.
because
Right.
God would not God would not allow folk to stay in the situation of oppression that these day laborers were in.
Right. Yeah. I think that well, I think that it's interesting the way that Carter tries to read it, because he tries to bring it down to like an egalitarianism, Um, I can share. I'll
Yeah, shit. Go ahead.
share what his,
Yeah.
this is kind of his conclusion to the.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay. I remember that. Yeah.
sorry
Okay.
for all the
Yeah.
marking. This I got my book used, and some of
Yeah.
this is mine, and some of it's the person before me. It's a whole mess of
Oh my. Okay.
marking. Um, so he says, in the end, he's saying the parable challenges audiences of disciples to embrace this alternative egalitarian lifestyle and to view social structures and interactions from the perspective which is fundamental to God's empire. That reign challenges hierarchical or patriarchal structures. And you know, he ties this chapter in with chapter 19, which deals more directly with like the household. But anyway, the last will be first and the first will be last, with its transformative power to shape an alternative way of life. The supreme irony and surprise of the parable are that the householder has the most to lose and to gain from clearly seeing and consistently enacting the principle of egalitarian treatment, which he has demonstrated and articulated in this one transaction in the parable. The parable presents him as a cartoon figure with exaggerated ironic characteristics. I will say that the other thing that I think is important that um, Carter brings out is that he says, here, whenever the guy says, "I choose to give to this last the same as I give you,"
Yeah.
is your eye evil because I'm good? He basically says the householder asserts his privilege as owner to dispose his wealth as he chooses without complaint, question, or comment. It is an elitist privilege and strategy. It overlooks other criteria that might guide his disposal of his wealth, such as the maximum benefit for others in 1921, which is the rich young ruler,
Mhm.
where he's told to sell everything he owns and give it to the
Oh yeah.
poor.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Make a difference.
other options are available
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
how you might dispose of your
Yeah.
wealth, as you were
Yeah.
suggesting.
Yeah.
That this guy is doing something here, but
So I
uh,
guess the question is, does this parable push the wealthy landowner to think, huh, maybe I need to be different?
right. Well, it seems to me that the parable does not put much responsibility onto the landowner,
No,
and of course the people hearing the parable were most likely not the landowners,
no, they don't. Yeah.
um, but what is it, the question is, what is it, he's suggesting that it's saying to the disciples somehow they must acknowledge some egalitarian lifestyle out of this. But yeah, it is hard because it's not clear
Yeah.
how the landowner doesn't necessarily, I mean, he's given the minimum
Yeah.
to
So
everyone,
he's
you
not
know
changing, but maybe like you're saying, that Carter was saying that that the lifestyle of this community, this called out community, the church, will not be like the lifestyle of the culture that you're used to. That we will share our resources.
Mhm.
We will make sure that those who are struggling have enough, because that's what the Spirit of God calls us to do.
Right. And there's
Not to be like the dominant culture that we participate in every day.
yeah.
Now, I would hope that the push would be also, during the Matthews community, they didn't push for change, but I would hope that as we read this parable, we would push and challenge structures and challenge systems that lead to oppression. Matthews community, I don't think they could not go that far.
Right. Yeah, I think. Well, speaking of coming from a different understanding or a different perspective, again, I think it's instructive what what the community of peasants in Nicaragua had to thought about this parable.
Okay.
Um, and I'll have to just read a couple quotes. Well, and also, well, anyway, I'll just, the priest who's there with them, whose name is Ernesto, begins by saying, talking about the distribution of the money at the end. If it was a question of money, it would be an injustice because all the wages he was giving were unfair.
Right.
He was robbing all of them because she should have given them the profits, not just the wages.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then someone says, in the new society, everybody's going to get the same amount, not according to the work, but according to the need.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me when you make a revolution, the first ones that work in it shouldn't demand more than others who join it at the end. Because the revolution is equality. It makes everybody the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that also means that it is never too late to work for the revolution. Then he says, then nobody will get paid for what they know or what they do, except according to their needs. And everybody has almost the same needs. They have to earn the same. So it's interesting because to me, I think that even coming to that place of being able to speak those words and think that they might be correct is very foreign to us in America.
Right.
That just those the ideas they're expressing would not come immediately spring to people's minds here. The idea that the way that distribution works is based on everybody's need.
Mm-hmm.
Without regard to how long that they worked or how long, or what they did.
That resources will be given out that lead to transformation of the state that they're in. Can you imagine 300 years ago, a slave reading this story,
right?
And he's working on a plantation. He's like, please,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
interesting because if you went to if you went to the slave quarters, the newest arrival to the oldest person there to everyone was sharing whatever they had.
Right.
We're
they had to survive.
Right. We're concerned about everybody's survival,
Right.
And it was anathema to be the person who stays in the house, and reaps all those benefits and doesn't share it with everybody else.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like there's like a but there is a way, like you're saying, that this doesn't directly challenge the landowner.
No, it does. It does not challenge the system. What's the word I heard somebody use? The extreme capitalism of the system.
Right.
It doesn't challenge that.
Yeah. Right. And this is I think this is just something though that it's something I think that maybe is, that people don't necessarily, people in desperate situations, sometimes it lose patience with, this kind of, these kind of stories.
Right.
But
Because
I think that,
yeah,
the biblical understanding in a way is that, we win over people one by one. We win over people community by community, and
right.
yeah.
It's
It's
just
yeah,
it's just like that article I sent you about, how, how much the difference the 1% can make,
right,
with their wealth,
right,
but we 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 see is we saw I think I saw a story couple of days ago that how um poverty really increased in 2022,
mhm,
with the expiration of the COVID relief and other stuff going on, how poverty just has exploded in 2022. So those struggling at the bottom, their situation has gotten a whole lot worse
right.
in years past.
Well, I will say that the one thing I thought about that article that's similar to what we are talking about here
Yeah,
is that it's asking some of us as the 1% in the global economy
right.
to help out the rest of the people of the globe, while it's not saying, it's doing the same thing that the parable's doing. It's
Right.
not talking to the landowner.
Yeah.
It's talking to us workers.
That's a cutting the child credit. That yes,
Mhm.
one of the things to help to
Yeah.
increase the poverty. And I mean, it's the same argument that you hear in terms of climate change, that those
Right.
in the industrialized nations should be helping those in those who don't contribute as much to the
Right.
climate change. But that's that fight that's going on right now.
Right.
That
Yeah.
that folks don't want to do that.
Well, and the same idea is that they tell you that you need to recycle while they keep doing,
What they're doing.
on a
Yeah.
mass scale, whatever, you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
What they're
Yeah.
doing. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, the phrase, the last will be first and the first will be last, is a phrase that Frantz Fanon, who wrote the book The Wretched of the Earth, which is
Mhm.
about the Algerian Revolution, and uh, you know, and basically he pulls the phrase out to say that, like, this is how you know when a place has been decolonized, when the people who are on the bottom are on the top, and the people who are on the top are on the bottom. You know what I mean? And so, you know, it would be interesting to compare the message of the two kind of
Yeah.
uses of the text, because he basically goes straight at the landowners and
Right.
and says that that's where you need to focus your
Yeah.
your revolutionary fervor or whatever.
The only
um,
thing I would say about that though is that if you don't have a change in terms of psyche, otherwise it becomes an animal farm.
right, right,
Where
right.
the pigs, they took over, but they became just as bad as
Yeah,
the animals before them. So
right,
if you don't change the mindset, if you don't decolonize the mind,
right.
then you just
Yeah,
end up having the same situation all
yeah.
over again.
Well, it's interesting there that there was um an imprisoned intellectual guy, that wrote a commentary on the Wretched of the Earth, and one of the things he talks about is how, um, you know one of the main transformation that Fanon is talking about is that transformation of, you know
Mind.
turning people becoming the new humanity, that
Yeah,
people becoming a new human being,
yeah,
in a way.
yeah,
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 for sure,
yeah.
for sure. But
I guess
yeah,
the thing is how far do we push this in terms of teaching and preaching? I mean, you're preaching, I'm not, but
yeah,
in terms of folks are used to hearing the vineyard owner as God.
right,
I mean,
yeah,
how far do we push them to think that, man, you may want to think about this another
yeah.
direction?
Yeah, well, especially because the way Matthew frames
Yeah,
it is really
yeah,
hard to avoid
yeah,
that particular way, because he basically says the kingdom of heaven is like,
yeah. It's like, yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
you're right.
well, in the last parable that we had, was like basically said, you know, and just like this, the Lord will blah 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 blah. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. It's difficult. I think that I think you have to. I think you have to stress like um Carter does here at the end, that like these are very exaggerated characters, like,
right,
that are meant to kind of push a point, and you can't, you can't make it so easy to equate the things,
yeah,
and that Jesus had a way of teaching that was not necessarily the kind of way that we like, like where it's clear cut exactly what he's trying to
yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah.
I
And I
think.
think Jesus does that intentionally to give folk a chance to buy in,
Mhm.
and in terms of seeing multiple possibilities.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I love. One of the things I love about Jesus' teaching,
Right.
how Jesus teaches, in that um, there are there's more than one way to look at this thing. You know,
And I
um,
think the other way to talk about it is to talk about it from, to say, you know, in Matthew's gospel, what Matthew is trying to say here, because Matthew has a very particular thing he's trying to say to his
right,
community, and we don't necessarily have to equate that with what Jesus was trying to do or say.
right,
He's taking these words of Jesus and making a point out of them.
out of them, right,
And I mean, I think that the point that Matthew is pressing is obviously that there are people coming into the family of God,
hmm
that people who have been lifetime members of don't necessarily think that they should have to, treat them fairly, or in the
fairly and
same
make room.
in
Yeah,
the same boat as
yeah,
you know, and so it's a question of, how do we treat each other that are coming
right.
in at different places and
Yeah.
stages,
And how do we see ourselves? Not and
right,
can we start maybe seeing ourselves in a different
right.
way?
Well, and I think that we have to remember that the communities the communities that were the church, like, to be a part of that body as the church meant that you were going to share things together, like
Hmm.
your very physical, material things were going to be
Right,
shared together, and you were going to commit to kind of a life together that was going to put you in a very different position than where you were before, probably.
right.
Outside of your family to some degree, outside of your traditional um, livelihood or whatever, to some degree. And so you can understand how all the promises that were made to the Jewish people and how their expectations of them coming true for them,
Yeah.
and having very real material consequences about the land that they own, and the the world they live
Oh
in,
yeah.
and how they're provided for,
Yeah.
to just say, okay, well, now these pork eaters can can come in and
Yeah.
have a share of what
Yeah.
God has promised me,
Right.
like
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
does that's not, that's not right. And it's hard for us to see it that way, because our whole understanding is so spiritualized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like for us, it's like anyone can come in and say the words, you know what I mean? And we say that, yeah, you're welcome into the faith.
Yeah.
But if it
And I
came
think
down to like, hey, we're going to share our resources together,
yeah. And I
then it
think
might be a
because
little different about who gets what.
yeah, and I think because we're so in a culture which is dominated by capitalism and the idea of the private
Right,
ownership of property and land.
right,
I mean, that has a big influence on us too, and it's hard to get that
right,
out of our system in terms of what
right.
Matthew's trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And part of the way that we read these texts is shaped by the desire to promote private
private
property.
ownership.
I
Right.
mean, and so we don't that's why we think in the spiritualized way that we think,
Yeah.
because if otherwise we would be running up against all the time. The communal control of our lives and our
A lot.
property
Yeah.
and our
Yeah.
land. That
Yeah.
would be it would keep happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's one thing about the parable that it doesn't address. Well, I mean, I think I don't know whether Carter said it or someone else said it, but obviously, you know, um, the day laborers, one of the things he mentioned is that some of these people were people who used to be um, the ones who worked the
Yes.
very land
Yeah.
that they are now being sent into as day laborers.
Yeah.
This was what they considered their land,
Yeah.
in common with those around them
Yeah.
that either farmed or whatever this land. And so when the landowner says, I can do whatever I want with what's mine,
Yeah. They were like,
you
wait
know,
a minute.
they're like, hold it now.
Hold on.
You know,
Hold on.
that's exactly what I was saying 10 years ago.
10 years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
But before my land got seized and sold
yeah,
off because I couldn't pay my taxes or
right.
what have you. Yeah. So there had to be, I would imagine, as someone here has heard this parable, there would have been some anger. And I
Yeah,
think I heard you mention before I came on, maybe some anger or some trauma because, hey, they took my stuff. I couldn't
right,
pay my taxes. I couldn't pay
right,
my bills. They took it and seized it, and now it belongs to, you know, Mr. Joe Grape up here.
right, right,
He's got it. But that used to be mine. There had to be some
right.
anger and some remorse there.
Well, and then one of the things that Herzog goes into is, from a Jewish background, you have to think about you know, the whole kind of code around, debts and land,
Hmm.
and how, you know, there was a whole system set up so that people wouldn't lose their land, wouldn't become day laborers in perpetuity, wouldn't become indebted
Yeah.
to other people. There was a jubilee, there was a debt
Right.
forgiveness, there was, that was all set up, and it was all set up under the understanding that no one owned the land. The
Right.
land was Yahweh's,
Right.
and you
Right.
didn't,
I
you didn't,
just wonder, and this I have to do some more research, how that we know how that changed once they're under Roman occupation.
right,
I mean, how much did they do Jubilee anymore
right.
because of Herod and those and Roman occupation?
Well, I think the Bible might even say, how much did it change under David? How much did it
Yeah,
change under Solomon?
yeah,
How much did it
yeah,
change under, it didn't take it didn't
yeah,
take any Roman. It
yeah.
only took some people pretending like they were the lords of all
Oh,
to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
to
The
make it
king,
to
the
make it
king.
so,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Um Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this text just yet. I have to be honest. I've
yeah,
done some study on it. I've got some quotes. I've done some this or that, uh and we have been doing the last few weeks we have been talking about community, you know, what do you do when there's a conflict in the community, from
right,
the first week, and then, the importance of forgiveness to keep a community together, and then now this, I'm,
yeah.
thinking about this idea of,
It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to try to tell the story from the perspective of the day laborer.
mhm,
That might be. I mean, that just say
yeah,
that might be something interesting to do.
yeah,
You know, and let him or her share their story and what life was
right,
like life for them, um, and how living and now in this new community gave them see life in a new possibility as compared to how it was living
right,
under how it was before.
yeah,
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 it might be interesting.
yeah. And I think that, when I've done it in the past, that's sort of the way
Yeah,
I've tried to emphasize the to try to get people out of the mentality of, the last workers were lazy, good
right.
for nothing
And
workers, you know,
and
who
Carter does an
obviously
excellent
didn't
point.
deserve what they got.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And
I
Carter
think
makes
that
an excellent point. Like these folks weren't standing around like against the wall, with a Bible in their hand. They were looking for work. They just
right,
could not find work.
right.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think somehow I I don't know if folk really understand the struggle of folks really at the bottom. We have to somehow let their voice be heard. So,
Hmm.
I mean, certainly as times have gotten hard, inflation's gotten worse, housing prices going up, everything's going up. I think we need to hear their story.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Need to hear the story. Need to hear the story of the waitress, the street sweeper,
Mhm.
whatever you want,
Right. Yeah.
the everyday day laborer who sometimes I remember used to see folks, waiting at the 7-Eleven to get picked up by the trucks so they can go to
Yeah.
work. Yeah, I mean,
Well, you ever go, down there by the
by the
down there by Maggie Walker,
yeah,
and that Lowe's there.
yeah,
There
yeah,
used to be, you drive down by that, there'd be
yeah,
like people standing all over the place out there
yeah,
waiting.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's definitely part of it. It's
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I'm still in the
So
still up in the air,
already, yeah,
up in
okay,
the air about it, but
yeah,
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 something there.
yeah,
Um yeah.
yeah. Interesting. What's up for next week?
I'm gonna have to check because if I'm right, I might be away next week.
Okay,
So I might have to miss. I'm actually going in for October for the next until the last week of October. I'm going into a different series that's more stuff about community. That's different texts and things like that. So
you're not doing the lectionary
I'm
test.
not doing. I'm not in the lectionary for the
Okay,
next little bit, but we'll see. We'll see what we can do.
okay.
We'll see. We'll check with Leonard, see
So
what
you want?
he's preaching on. But I'll let you know. But I think I might be away next week.
All right. Do you just want to say? So what's you just want to go to the whatever the week after next? Then now do that now. If you think you'll be away.
Yeah, let's think about the second.
Oh,
Yeah.
Cheryl made a comment. What she say?
Oh,
What makes this because the sharing doesn't seem equal. I am not sure I understood the greater need, not necessarily because of the difference in amount, but because there is not an express difference in need. I imagine a difference in wages for women and people of color for doing the same job. In this case, there is a huge difference in our. Okay, all right. I mean, she's talking about the economic system. Yeah, that that the text to me forces us to challenge the system
right,
and
right,
to challenge the laws and the systems in place that promote equality inequity.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying, Cheryl, about
yeah,
like if you imagine today the differences, the way that different groups are paid,
yeah.
different wages for the same
Same job,
work, or
work. Yeah,
um, yeah, because it's hard. It's yeah, the parable itself doesn't lend itself to differences like that. It's just the hours, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's hard because it's hard because again, everybody's getting the worst. Everybody's getting the worst deal.
yeah.
I well,
Everybody's getting robbed. Let's just be
yeah.
honest. Everybody's getting robbed.
Well, and I was thinking about I was just listening to some interviews from Toledo the what's the name of the car company the Chrysler is now?
So
Stellantis, where the
okay
UAW focus are on
on
strike.
strike now. Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, and it was a temporary worker. I mean, she's been there for 4 years or whatever, but she's not on, she's not a full-time worker. She just put on when she comes on, and she
yeah,
does in the day that she works, she does the same job or the worst jobs as the full-time people,
Right.
but she gets, half of what they get
What
paid.
they get.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
obviously she's not happy about that.
Yeah.
But again, it's a question, that it's hard because like they are challenging the landowner, they're
Yep.
challenging the car company,
Yep.
you know
Yep.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
guess it's a question of,
their challenge is the modern day vineyard holder.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
In our parable, it's kind of like, you know, whatever you all get, you should be happy
I'm
with
happy
it
with
or
it.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
of
I'm
course,
paying.
again, they're also all getting the same amount,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not easy. I can tell
Yeah.
you that right now.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah. You're getting $25 an hour. You should be, I mean, or
Yeah.
$20 an hour. Man, be
Yeah.
happy. Hey,
Right.
it could be $15 an hour. Hey.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think probably the biggest challenge for any of us, right, is to try to figure out whether we're being more like the landowner or being more like,
Yes. Where
you know what I mean?
where do we
I mean,
fit in? Exactly.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like, cause
What is our participation in the system that's
yeah,
present, but where do we fit in? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm sure maybe, well, I guess if Matthew's readers were part of the bottom 97%, but still, if they're in the new community, are they sharing the way they should be? So I don't know.
yeah. So for the second, we might have to do that Matthew 21, huh, Leonard? That makes sense. Yeah.
What, Matthew 21?
Yeah, that's what he's saying. It's the eighth. The eighth is Matthew 21, 33 through 46. With tenant farmers. So
Okay.
yeah. I'm down to do a little Matthew even when I'm not preaching on it. So if that works, that'll work. Yeah. I mean, Matthew's point, I think, is that everyone gets the same amount because he's trying to make a point about like something that's not quite as tangible as just
Yeah.
wages. He's
Yeah.
trying to say that there is this access to this family of God
Which
that
is
that has been given to some early on and now has been opened up to others,
others. Yeah.
and we have to, welcome people in.
Yeah.
And everyone should be enjoying the fruits of that at the same level as everyone
Same
else,
level. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
which, you know, um, it's interesting because next week at my church, we're going to have a woman who, the Exodus text this Sunday.
On this Sunday. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
Okay.
This might be a good one to avoid.
Well, you talk about this will be the eighth, so that will be two.
Yeah. The
2
eighth. We'll
weeks
do
from
that.
now. So
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, on the second, we can look at at Matthew 21 for the 8th.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah,
We can do that.
yeah. That'll be good. Yeah.
That'll be good.
Anyway,
Good
I was going to
stuff,
say
man.
that there's a woman coming that's a friend of someone in the church who's Jewish, and we've been reading the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. It's James McBride's new book. He wrote The Color of Water and that, anyway, but we've been reading that book alongside this community discussion. And it's about a town in Pennsylvania that has like a white part of town, then it has like a Jewish and black part of town.
Okay.
And kind of how all the community groups work together and live together and stuff like that. So she's going to come and like tell us a little bit about some of the Jewish references and background, but it'd be interesting to hear out of this text, to hear a Jewish perspective on
Yeah, it would be interesting.
other people claiming to be a part of this tradition of the Abrahamic tradition that that might be a solo. Other people might want
Are you
to
going to ask her?
hold closely to
Are you
themselves.
going to ask her to comment?
I want to see how I can make that not too controversial of a claim.
You going
Of course, I don't know her background either. Whether she's whether she's actually a practicing person or whether whether she's just culturally or whatever. So,
Okay.
but it should be interesting. I'll let you know how it
Let
goes.
me how it goes. Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, Cheryl and Leonard, thanks for joining us in the chat. That's good.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Looking for Cheryl to jump on with us sometime.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't send her the link this time, so I got to do it. I got to do it next. I got to do it on the 2nd.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. All right.
All right.
All right, Darren. Talk to you.
Yeah. Talk to you later.
All right. All right.